Hello, everyone. It is now day 8 of our Lenten reading through the writings called 1st and 2nd Samuel. By way of recap, the situation in the previous reading had turned to chaos. Uh, Saul had shown his disobedience by way of the sacrifice as he grew impatient, waiting for Samuel, feeling pressure to do something for the morale of his armies. Uh, his men, including his own son, were also showing a lack of discipline. And so now it is, now that the battle is over, um, Saul's going to have to deal with this. And so we open up with chapter number 15, and, Samuel is old. It seemed like he was phasing out, but he still has a prominent role to play because Saul has demonstrated that he is not going to be trustworthy. So Samuel reminds Saul, I was the one who anointed you, and now I'm going to tell you what God says. It's time to deal with the Amalekites. And the Amalekites had interfered with the Hebrews while they were making their way to the promised land. And now, evidently, it is time for a reckoning of that. So Samuel gives him directions from God. All right, you're going to go to the Amalekites. You're going to destroy everything. You're not going to leave any person alive. You're not going to leave any of their livestock alive. You're going to destroy everything. You're going to eliminate, essentially, proverbially, every fingerprint, every bit of evidence that they existed. In these readings, it's hardly any time in these short videos to dig deep into the ethics of all of this, but it's important to keep in mind that we're talking about the story of a people. These are historical books. They're narratives written through these people's experiences, and so here, as we read it, it's time to have a reckoning with the Amalekites. Saul seems to enjoy battle. He gets validation there. So he's going to be able to battle. Well, they are successful in their war with the Amalekites here. Once again, they're enjoying the taste of victory. They mop them up. But what does Saul do? He was already in trouble from our last reading, and maybe he's got a chance to be obedient here and help himself out. But he's going to decide to leave King Agag of the Amalekites alive. Not sure why he's going to do this. Usually you eliminate heads of state in these wars, but he's going to become some sort of political prisoner, I suppose. Also, Saul is going to spare the best flock, cattle, and fatlings of the Amalekites, save their best animals and their possessions of value. Well, how is that going to work out? We already know, don't we? Samuel's in pain because of it. God is grieved. So Samuel's going to confront Saul over his disobedience. Saul maintains his innocence, that he's been honest. Well, that's not going to play out. He's not going to be able to stand on that, but for so long. Then he begins to make excuses. Well, I brought these things back. I spared these animals so I could bring them back and sacrifice them to God. Well, that's not going to stand either. And here, we have some of the most memorable poetic writings within the historical narrative in the Old Testament. Um, Samuel says to Saul, verse 16, "Let me tell you what the Lord's told me last night." And Saul says, "Tell me. Is it not true that when you were insignificant in your own eyes, you became head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord chose you as king." Remember Saul, he was the one who was humble, or so it seems, perhaps bashful. Well, now he's become a bit overly confident. And then we go down, the poetry continues in verses 22, 23. The question of rhetoric: does the Lord take pleasure in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as he does in obedience? Certainly, obedience is better than sacrifice. Paying attention is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and presumption is like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the Lord's orders, he has rejected you as king. Saul was still trying to assert that he was obedient somehow. But eventually he's going to break and tell Samuel exactly why he was disobedient. He was afraid. His soldiers had fought, and they wanted some spoils, the booty of war, and he wanted to give it to them. He wanted to be popular. And so Saul wants to see if they can work this thing out still, but Samuel's aware, no, it's done. Samuel is going to take care of the king Agag of the Amalekites, who Saul let live. Samuel's going to take care of it himself, even as an old man. And then as chapter 15 closes, it says Samuel leaves, and he's not going to see Saul ever again, but he's in mourning, and evidently God is in mourning as well. He's regretting this. So then, we're in transition still. This still remains the introductory phase, really, to the primary character of these letters, and now we finally meet David. God is going to ask Samuel, "How long do you intend to mourn over Saul? I've done found someone else. I want you to go to Bethlehem. I want you to sacrifice. Here, call Jesse, have him gather his sons, and you're going to find a king out of these." But he says to Samuel, God does, in verse 7, another well-remembered portion of Scripture, "Don't be impressed by the appearance or height." God does not view things the way people do. People look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Remember, Saul was tall and handsome, and we're not going to choose this time based on those characteristics. So Jesse calls out his sons. 7 of them are there, but Samuel realizes that none of these are meant to be king. He's going to say, "Is there not any more sons that you have?" "Yes, there is one more, and he keeps sheep." The most remedial of tasks. We're going to see some glimpses into David's family background. We see it initially now. He is someone who's an afterthought. He's someone who's small in the eyes of his family. He wasn't summoned with the rest of his brothers before the prophet. However, David comes, Samuel takes the oil and anoints him, and here the Spirit of the Lord now comes to David and remains there. Well, wouldn't you know, of course, Saul is got an evil spirit now. Undoubtedly, he's depressed, perhaps regretful, and the spirit is tormenting him. And don't you know, David is able to play the stringed instruments. And so someone suggests to Saul during his depression, his oppression, "Why don't you have David come play for you?" we're not exactly sure if Saul is aware of David's, that he's been anointed. In fact, when Samuel was going there to Bethlehem, uh, we read earlier in this chapter that Samuel definitely wants to keep this a secret. So Saul's probably not aware. But now here is David coming to play, as we usually call the harp, the string instrument, to Saul to relax him. So last time we left and there was conflict. This time it's perhaps a bit more optimistic tone. We're continuing to see transition now from Saul to David, but Saul's not going anywhere yet either. In 8 days of our readings, now we have managed to transition through the first half of 1 Samuel, and now we are in the second half. See you again next time.